Hi everybody, this is Patti Lee and this is my 7th episode of the True Crime Grapevine. If you're new here, hi, I'd like to welcome you and tell you this channel is a review of what everybody in other YouTube channels have been talking about on the True Crime Grapevine. If you don't have time to watch a bunch of true crime YouTube videos, scan all of Twitter, read all of the interwebs, I'll do it for you and try to concisely let you know what happened the last week. So sit back and relax. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you. Don't forget, if you do happen to like it, to like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications when I upload. I upload once a week. And that's about it. So, busy week, let's get to it. Today we're going to be talking about some big cases, and a lot happened all at once. The first case we're going to be talking about is a new case, and it's already had some sort of conclusion to the investigative stage, which is the case of Cassie Carly. I also call myself the dyslexic, the dyslexic detective. There you go. It wasn't even on purpose. So when names start with the same, when there's an alliteration, which is the same consonant in both the beginning and last name, sometimes I have a little bit of a hard time. So Cassie Carly, we're going to be talking about her case. We're going to catch up with what's going on with the Naomi Ariane case, which was a new case, or newly discussed last week. It had been going on since March 12th. Another end to the investigative stage with not a great ending. That's 2 this week. And the whole true crime interwebs have been very depressing. It's kind of... it's not unusual to have the ending not be what we want it to be, but it's always really sad, and these were 2 cases just happened one right after the other. It hasn't been a great week for happy endings. And then there's some interesting things that took place in the Barry Morphew case. And then we have some odds and ends with, there was the Petito and Schmitz filed against the Laundries. We have a little update with what the Laundries filed back in that case, a civil case at this point, and an update on the GMAX trial, and maybe we'll gossip a little bit about what is being talked about in South Cackalack with the Murtaugh case. Not really an update on anything legal, just an update on what's spreading on the grapevine. So, let me also just say before we start with the cases, everybody who is suspected or mentioned as being suspected is innocent until proven guilty, and everything I am saying is alleged speculation, just my opinion. We're talking about what everybody else is talking about. So take, as you should, as your mama should have told you, take everything that's gossipy with a grain of salt, including what I'm going to tell you. All right? As Shondaland would say, this is all true except for the parts that aren't. And we don't always know. So let's get into it. Case number 1, our new case of Cassie Carly. Cassie Carly was a mom of a beautiful little 4-year-old girl named Sailor. And they were from Navarro Beach. Her dad was a Brazilian native who moved to the U.S., I assume for work. I'm not exactly sure about his backstory. But him being from Brazil will come into this, in my opinion. He lived in Panama City Beach. So those are about 2 hours apart in the panhandle of Florida. And because they shared custody, he had custody every other weekend, he would meet... the dad would meet the mom, Cassie, to do a custody exchange. All right, so So she's not a baby, right? She's 37. She has this 4-year-old. Apparently she was previously married and had infertility problems, as I'm sure many of you can relate to. And when she surprisingly, was pregnant, dating this guy, she was like, I'm having this baby. So she had the baby, Sailor, who is safe, I'd like to report right up front. They had sort of a, like it happens with people, right? A contentious situation about who gets what. And according to her family, Casey was very happy, like, that the relationship was, she was happy that she had the baby. She was happy that she wasn't married to this guy, because he tended, according to the family, they reported, was sort of narcissistic and kind of, his dad said, cunning. He would come to these, when they battled about, custody, he would come to court, this is the father's word, and pretend to be like the poor immigrant, like, oh, I just don't understand, and played the system. That's from Cassie's dad's point of view. So, last Sunday, March 27th, they were doing their, it was the bi-weekly exchange. Typically, they would meet in Destin, because that's halfway between Panama City and Navarro Beach, but apparently, I don't think we know what the excuse was, but he's like, oh, hey, I can bring her all the way to you. We'll meet at 7 p.m., which is about sunset, at this parking lot behind these restaurants. So it was public, but it was at sunset. He was, but very close to her house. So she told her dad, hey, I'm going to go get Sailor. I'll be right back. She does not come right back. So the dad, she's 37, she's almost 40, right? He waits. Maybe they went somewhere. Maybe she took her out to eat. They just got her back from a visit. So maybe they're celebrating, getting back together. Who knows? Maybe she needed something for school. But anyways, then he realizes that by 10:30, something is up. Where is Cassie? Text. Where are you? What's going on? I'm worried. So then he gets these weird texts back. And he said, the family feels it's weird because it didn't seem to be written how she usually texts. And she texted that she was having she said, oh, like, I'm really sorry. I'm having car trouble and my phone's about to die. I'm going home with Marcus, which is the baby's father. And I'm going to be doing something. He's paying me to do something at his house. And this was all very strange because they had this contentious relationship, and she actually had even told her brother and sister, like, hey, if anything ever happens to me, it's Marcus. So the dad was like, okay, but you're going to his home and he said in PBC, Panama Beach City, and she was like, well, yes, and it wasn't really clear, but he was like, okay, well, I was just worried about my girls. So he thinks it's strange, but okay. Then the next day rolls around. And then he finds out she did not go to work. So she did not come home. She did not go to work. And then he's trying to get a hold of her. She's not responding. So he calls him, not his son-in-law because they're not married, but Marcus. And Marcus's last name is very difficult for me to say. It is something like, I want to say Spedaloni, but that's not it, like Spicoli. But we know that was in a movie, not real life. His name is Spanavello. So Marcus Spanavello. So Marcus answers in a text and says, oh yeah, well, she jumped out of the car halfway in Destin, where nothing was around, and said she was going to go to her friend Stacy's. Okay, then the dad's flipped out because the Stacy friend, yeah, she doesn't live in Destin in Florida. She moved months ago to Alabama. That's not right. So then he's like, what's going on? And he doesn't hear, and the guy's like, I don't know. I have Sailor, though. She's safe. So that is Monday night. Alarm bells are ringing in the dad's head, and he's like, contact the police. So it's like at 5:30 at night. He contacts police. Let me just tell you, You want this type of response if you or anybody you know goes missing. The brother, the sister, the friends, they organize immediately search parties at the beach that she was last seen in Navarro Beach. Oh, and they do find they find her car there after the dad, alarm. The police look. They find her car right where she was supposed to have met him. They wouldn't say if the car was non-functioning like the text said, but the police did say then her purse was in the car. So anyway, these people immediately hit the ground running. By, I believe, that night, by Tuesday night, they are organizing for Wednesday. They're ready. They are going out and searching the water. They're in the water looking for her. They are starting social media blitzes, talking to channels such as this, the ones especially that do the deep dives. They are being interviewed by people. They are talking to newspapers. They are talking to JB at FLA in Florida, getting the message out. This is Cassie. She is with Sailor. They would not. We don't know where they are. This is not a good custody exchange. She was afraid of Marcus. What's his name? I can't say his last name. Sorry, but she was afraid of Marcus. They showed a picture of Cassie and showed a picture of Sailor. Have you seen them? These people plastered the airwaves with this information. And I think that is a big reason why that was that started Tuesday and into Wednesday. By Wednesday, the cops found Marcus. He had gone to a job in Birmingham, Alabama. So that's about almost 250 miles away from Navarro Beach. Everybody said that he had been driving this truck with this trailer. So they know where he is, and in any new case, especially when things are fresh and things are happening, there's a lot of misinformation, not on anybody's fault, but just because things get reported and then, grapevine, right? You tell one person, and it changes a little bit. And everything was so new. So it seemed as if they said Alabama Child Protective Services had checked on Sailor and she was fine. And at first it seemed like they had her and she was fine. No. So it turns out what happened was they located Sailor and Marcus, and he was at a work site. He was in Alabama. The daughter was fine and the mom was missing. And he was sticking to his story of, hey, I don't know, man. I'm the last person to see her, but yet she jumped out of the car. I don't know where she was going. All I know is that I have to take care of my daughter, and I've got this job up here in Alabama. Well, it seems a little unbelievable that they just left the daughter with him, because his custody time was not then. But they were watching by this point. The authorities were watching very clearly. But as we know, when you start going through state lines, so this started in Florida at Navarro Beach. It was their sheriff's, the St. Rosa sheriff's, county sheriff's law enforcement was the one handling it. But he's in Alabama, so they have to talk to the people in Alabama. Then Alabama has to, work with it. The FBI was involved though by this time, so that is good. We've got these agencies watching Marcus and whatever. So Thursday, so Wednesday they locate Marcus, they check on Sailor. Thursday there is a press conference in Florida with the Navarro Beach and that county's sheriff. They have a big meeting, and it's televised, and it's very interesting. They show Cassie, they show Marcus and say, hey, he's not, they didn't call him a person of interest. When the reporters asked, they're like, he was the last person to see her. But it's interesting because they showed his photo. So iCkEdMel. His name is Melvin, but his channel is iCkEdMel. That description and thanking him for his sourcing will be down in the show notes. iCkEdMel has a great channel where he goes live. He will show what's going on he'll have part of the screen show the actual, sometimes it's WFLA's, a little bit of their reporting. Then he showed the conference of the police department, and he even had a person from the area in Navarro Beach sort of give a background on what was going down there, how the searching was going, what people were saying, who is this Marcus, what's his family like, what's going on. I will tell you, iCkEdMel is a great channel to get the real, especially if it's a Florida case, the real scoop, the real on-the-boots reporting. Again, you have to take a little bit of it, grain of salt. It's happening in the moment. Things change. But let me just tell you, one of the things that he played, he plays everybody's resources too. So it's a nice way to get everything in one place. The family was talking about, on Facebook, Marcus's mother in Brazil was writing, or had been writing prior to this all happening, can't wait to see something about counting the days until I see my beautiful granddaughter, or something to those effect, intimating that she was going to see Sailor, which that was not in the cards. So that brings up the idea that, was Marcus trying to run? And I looked up, is Brazil a country that we share do we have an extradition treaty with them? We do have an extradition treaty with them. Here's a weird little fact. If the person, though, isn't, if they are, they can be, I think they can have dual citizenship, but if one of their citizenships is being a Brazilian, which Marcus is, then you can't bring them back they won't extradite them. So we don't know what was going on here, but anyway, so that was just an interesting fact that, that might have even been brought up by this woman that iCkEdMel was talking to, that because people in Navarro Beach, they were searching, they were looking for her, they were on social media, and they were searching social media, looking for any clues as to where were Sailor and where was her mother, Cassie. So we know Sailor's safe with her dad. Well, we know Sailor's with her dad, and authorities are watching in Alabama. We don't know where Cassie is. That was Thursday. The pressure of all of that, and it blew up crazily online. I don't know, but Friday night, I believe it was, and maybe we heard Saturday, but he being Marcus, the father, had been arrested in Tennessee, so another 200 miles north on the same highway. We don't know where he was headed, but he was still heading out of town. And then there was the news that, as well, that Cassie had been found. And she was not found alive, which was heartbreaking, right? So at that point, I was like, okay, so Alabama Child Services has Sailor. And so the dad just ran off on his own, which was a misconception. No. So I don't know what happened in his brain Thursday, but by Friday he was packing up. Who knows if he really had a job in Birmingham, but he packed up his stuff and hightailed it, heading north with Sailor. So the Tennessee Highway Patrol actually pulled him first over on a traffic citation. I don't know if he was speeding at the time, but another fact that came out interestingly was, so Cassie was found at this barn in Alabama, in a shallow grave, in a stall of a a barn that had probably horse stalls, and it sounds like she was there. And then they first reported the property had some connection to Marcus, and we were all thinking, so like his girlfriend's house? Does he have a girlfriend up there? He works up there? So it seems like he either owned or rented the property, and it's not really clear if he had a relationship up there or if he just did have work up there. But apparently it would seem so he's not very bright, because you burying bodies on your own property attached to your name is kind of stupid anyways. The other interesting thing was, so he obviously goes to Alabama more. I mean, he rented this place. He must work up there or see somebody, because he also in December had gotten a speeding ticket for going 97 in a 70, and didn't show up for court then in March. So in March there was like a bench warrant out for him. So I don't know if Tennessee was able to, if they put out an all points bulletin. Obviously he was missing from Alabama. That was one of the ways they could find where he was. So and I'm assuming he was speeding like an idiot. So that's good, right? That his little speeding habit was the thing that tripped him up. So see, this is very confusing. So this all starts in Florida. He supposedly lives in Panama Beach City. She lived in Navarro. They typically met halfway in Destin, but they didn't that week. They met in Navarro Beach. He seems to have done something and taken her, obviously, because she ended up at his property in Birmingham, in Alabama. Not in the city of Birmingham. It was outside in a city, Springville, Alabama, off Highway 11. And then he takes off again as soon as things get hot. So the heat's on him. He takes the baby girl and is continuing north. We also found out, or at least iCkEdMel found out, Melvin, that somebody had taken a picture at 7:01 from a condo, and it was like Navarro Beach has like a little channel or a bay on one side, and the other side is the actual ocean. So it must, it's really beautiful there. So somebody was in a condo taking a picture maybe of the sunset, right? Because about 7 o'clock was when the sun went down. And they catch and iCkEdMel had the picture zoomed in on it, and you could see that man's truck exactly as described with this big trailer on the back, and the door was open at 7:01. So he went there. We don't know exactly what the baby saw. Somehow it seems like maybe put Cassie in that trailer. So, and then took her, and obviously he thought he would be bright, and like most people who are doing something, they don't think of how hard it is to dig a grave. And in case you're ever thinking of doing it, don't. It's much harder than you think. So I am assuming that's why it was shallow, and I'm assuming he did it inside his barn because then he could take his time and nobody could see what he was doing. So anyways, the family did describe him as like narcissistic, as I said, and cunning, and I think this is just all my speculation, and he's guilty until proven innocent, but it seems very much like a narcissist to think that you could get away with grabbing your kid and making a run for it. And I think he was headed for Brazil. I wouldn't be surprised to find that there were tickets out of some larger airport that he was headed to, or maybe he was headed all the way north, because the highway that he was on does go all the way up to Mackinac Island. Maybe he thought he would get as far as he could and head over to Canada and then fly out of there to Brazil. But if he was in Brazil, he would not have been extraditable. And if he had Sailor, she couldn't have come back. Like, he could have just lived there. So I'm thinking he had enough pride in himself to think he could pull this off. No. Don't even try to pull things off. When he was caught he was in the highway around Nashville, near Lebanon, Tennessee. They did find Sailor. She was safe. She was taken into protective custody, and then by now I think she's probably with her family back in Navarro Beach. They were making plans to get her back home to Florida, because at that time then they found that the mother had been unalived at Marcus's property. Now we can't say he did it. He's presumed innocent, but so this whole case blew up Wednesday and Thursday, and he was caught by late Saturday night and now is in custody and will be having to be extradited. Apparently he's not very helpful. The police had another news conference after they found Cassie and after they retrieved Sailor and arrested Marcus. They said was, and Scott Reisch, maybe he listened to you, all he said was lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. So as we know, we do have that right, and so he's not talking, he's not saying anything, and they assume that he won't waive extradition back to Florida, so it'll take about 30 days. So we will hear more about this case. Let me just leave you with this. If you have any sort of contentious issue with anybody, don't meet them after dark, and do not meet them alone. Take somebody with you. Even if you don't have anybody, you could have somebody on FaceTime. You could have a GoPro. You can get one of those tiles, put it somewhere on you. I mean, if you're really meeting with somebody that you think, if something happens to me, it's them, take a buddy, or as I like to call it, a witness. Take somebody so that that person knows that immediately they would be caught. I mean, thank goodness her family organized as quickly as it did and was media savvy. They really, I think, were the key to this quick process before he could get out of the country. They stopped him. They did God's work. Or whatever you believe in's work. Or just hard work themselves. I mean, along with the police, obviously. The law enforcement did a great job. Except, I don't know why Alabama, I guess they said they had no reason to take Sailor into custody. But I think they did have a reason. I'm not sure, but the custody was supposed to be with Mom. He didn't have custody during the week. They should have taken her back. I'm assuming she was probably enrolled in a preschool. She needed to be back in her life. That wasn't where she belonged. So I don't know about Alabama's protective services, but look, we all do the best we can, right? So we will hear more about Cassie, Carly, when we get to the next phase. You know, there's going to be an arraignment. He'll plead, I'm sure, not guilty. There'll be his extradition, blah, blah, blah. So that investigative period, very short. Our second case, another not great ending in my opinion, is Naomi Ariane. So I told you about Naomi Ariane last week. She was the 18-year-old who had been living, she was like the baby of, her parents had like two phases of children, like older kids, and then they adopted some younger kids. So she was like sort of in that middle group. And her dad was a diplomat. They had lived in Moscow. They had lived in Germany. And they were living in South Africa. But when you live in a diplomatic situation, you're often in a diplomatic community. She felt like she wanted to live more free. She wanted to live like a regular American. So because she was the baby of this like other part of the family, and her family said she was a miracle baby. Like, they didn't expect her to live. She beat all the odds. They were, they didn't expect, it was just, she was a beautiful, wonderful person. So anyways, she moves to Nevada, to Fenley, which is, it's a really small, I guess, really beautiful, nice community. She did that last August of 2021. Right away, she's 18, she gets a job, she's going to go to community college. She gets a job at Panasonic, which is in Reno, the next biggest city, and she takes a shuttle there from Walmart. And it was during waiting for her shuttle to arrive So Naomi was doing what a lot of 18-year-olds do, especially responsible 18-year-olds. She was meeting the shuttle to go to work. Her only mistake was being almost too responsible, because Naomi went there every day for work at the same time, did the same routine like a lot of us do, because she didn't want to miss the shuttle to work. And what probably happened was that Troy driver saw her one time, which all it takes is for a monster to see you once, and he started watching her and stalking her. And seeing that she did the same routine every day, it appears as if he targeted her. This is all my speculation. This is not anything we know for sure, but it just seems as if he, through watching the videotape, that he was very focused on her. So, unfortunately, what we now know is that after grabbing her, he did take her, kidnap her, and unalived her. We're not sure exactly of the details. What we do know of the details comes from what I would term a good Samaritan. A man who had been working with Troy Driver at his job at Leadcore. That's Ledcor, Leadcore, which had to do something with mines in the area. And the name, he's a 34-year-old man named Joel Santillan, and he did what we ask everyone to do. When you see something, say something. Keep your eyes and ears open, and let somebody know if you see something wrong. And so what this Good Samaritan did was, in my term, I think he's a Good Samaritan, he noticed that his mentor, the guy who had been training him for the past month at this new job, Troy Driver, didn't come in for work on Monday, March 13th, which was, or excuse me, I think the 12th was when she was taken, so I think Monday was the 14th or 15th of March. But on that Monday, following her disappearance, he did not show up for work. And this was unusual for his mentee, and he noticed that that was something that Troy didn't typically do. He was very punctual, and he was very consistent in coming to work. He was a good worker. And then Tuesday he was late to work, and I think he had texted him on Monday and had some excuse that didn't quite smell right, and then on Tuesday he said, oh, something else happened. So it's one of those kind of like with what we were talking about with Cassie, is when somebody tries to make up too many excuses, they end up, it's hard to remember all the lies together. And so Joel was already feeling like, what is going on with Troy? And then when he did show up Tuesday late, they went out to do something. I'm not exactly sure about their job, but they drove around and checked mines, or at least had something to do with doing something out in the field. And he noticed that when they went to a certain mine, that Troy walked away and said, oh, hey, I'm going to take a leak. I'm going to go to the bathroom. But he didn't hear him going to the bathroom. And, you know, you start to put things together. One thing adds up. And I think even at a gut level, even though you might not be thinking of, hey, I'm putting together a strategy or some sort of plan in my head. No, you sort of go, wait a minute, that's not right. And then they went to another remote area doing something. And he said it seems like Troy was gone too long. And it popped into his head, wow, that would be a really good place to get rid of evidence or do something. So what Joel did was he had turned over his phone with the text messages and his work computer that had some messaging, I guess, on it to the FBI. So I'm assuming he's the tipster that the FBI mentioned when they stated that they had found Naomi. I believe she was found Wednesday night, but we didn't find out until later, much later. Leadcore was not very happy with this new hire, Joel, ratting out Troy. And they said it had nothing to do with him talking to the FBI or anything, but thank you, no thank you. So he lost his job over this, and I don't know where that's going to go. The mine that in the area that they were in was called Churchill County, and that is where they found Naomi again. So and a lot of people, I didn't come up with this myself, the Daily Mail UK online, as well as iCkEdMel on his channel, we're also talking about this, the fact that it seems like he must have been the person that tipped the FBI as to what might be going on. So Troy Driver's charges went from kidnapping to he is now charged, obviously, with the big M. And he that happened on Friday the 1st, that he was charged, and he will be in court Tuesday, tomorrow, April 5th. So we'll find out more. I'll let you know what happens. I think the takeaway from Naomi, Ariane, is that we should teach our young people, and even whoever we are, we need to lock our doors when we're in our car. If it's dark, we need to have a buddy with us, even if it's somebody on the phone, if we're waiting. Try not to wait in the same spot. I'm sure she was told to park in a certain area to not take up a spot from customers. Again, for safety reasons, maybe, I'm not sure there's anything she could have done once she was targeted by the monster. And there are monsters that walk among us. But what we can try to do for those future Naomis is make sure your doors are locked if you're sitting in your car, and do not open the door for anyone. It's very hard. We teach politeness. She was raised on diplomatic areas and was very much taken care of, and she just wanted to live free in America, and she wasn't thinking. She lived in a very nice area. Findlay, Nevada is supposed to be very safe. So she wasn't thinking, lock my doors, keep them locked until I have to leave, keep my keys out and put them between my fingers. All the things that if you've lived in a city, you might think of. And unfortunately, it seems like you have to think of those things more now than ever before. So I think the other thing that we can take from this is, her brother said she looked scared and moved over. And I would tell any of you out there, as I tell my adult children, do not go to a second location. Even if they say they're going to shoot you, they're going to kill you, they're going to stab you. In the moment, I'm not even sure I could say, okay, go ahead. But, take your keys and throw them is one of the things, practice doing that. Practice getting your keys and throwing them. If the person wants your car, they'll go after your keys. I mean, if they want you, at least then they can't take you away from that location. Get out of the car and scream if you can. Push past them. If they're going to shoot you, you can survive a shooting. If they take you to a second location, it is typically all over. Do not go to the second location. If someone were to carjack you, you drive your car into a tree. Hopefully, if they're in the passenger seat, on their side. That is at this point all we can take from this, because Naomi did nothing wrong but be a very responsible worker who was waiting for her ride. She is not to be blamed. But again, what can we learn from this horrendous thing? We will see and hear from her alleged, we'll just say alleged, because guilty until proven innocent. He will be in court tomorrow. And of course, we'll hear more during the trial. And her family is devastated, and this is unfair, and I can't even tell you what kind of shame it is. But thank you to Joel for stepping up, even though it cost you your job, and you saw something, you said something. Let's all be that person. All right, that was our second case. Our third case is, where's my friend Barry Morphew? Our third case I'm a little disheveled here, sorry. It's been a crazy week. Barry Morphew was in court for what Emily D. Baker, who is a great channel, it's called The Emily Show, the Emily D. Baker. You can look her up. She's on Twitter, but her YouTube channel is great if you are interested in law. And she explains that motions that happen pre-trial, they call them in limine, and she always says in lemonade, so it's kind of easier to remember if you're not a law talking person. That's what's happening now in Barry Morphew's trial. They're discussing all the things now that the defense has gotten discovery. They're going to talk about what can and what can't come in, who can and who can't testify, and not only that, but can they be called an expert? And that, if you've been listening to lawyers such as Emily D. Baker or Scott Reisch, has been talking about the expert, what is it called? I don't think that's the prudent. No, that was about the statements. There was a term for expert witnesses. I'll try to remember next time. It's just a law talking word that we don't really need to worry on the grapevine, right? Because we're not lawyers. We're just voyeurs. But anyways, so all the news was saying 12 out of 14 expert witnesses were like denied or something. And I never got a list of 12 people. So here's the deal. I think the people that I heard of, I think most of the important ones that they discussed were, there was a dog handler who was on scene. He was, he's not a professional per se. I mean, he's called to volunteer to do things when people are lost, when they need help tracking somebody. It's not like his full-time job, and he doesn't work for a company that does this. They called him right when Suzanne was missing that night. He brought the dog out. The dog sniffed around, and the dog could not really find Suzanne, and around the bike even. So there was some video of Barry going in the house that night. He was going in the house just to get something. He's supposed to walk and get directly something of Suzanne's to smell. That's the dog they gave it to. And they said he went along the creek, but he never really hit on anything. He never gave a sign that, yes, like, I smell her. And so I believe the prosecution was going to use that to show, look, Suzanne's, like, the bike was a ruse. Suzanne never went that way. We think Suzanne was, snatched from the pool area on Saturday. But the dog handler can't come in at all because of discovery problems. Not because of what he said or because he wasn't an expert in this case. Oh, it's called a Shrek. Not like the Disney Shrek, but it has something to do with are they a professional? And it wasn't, the defense didn't say he wasn't a professional. The defense basically was saying this is a discovery problem because he had a report. Now this is weird. So he said he made like a little paragraph, like notes on his home computer for himself and maybe to share with his supervisor. I'm not really sure, but it's weird because he never sent it to the prosecution, so the prosecution couldn't send it to the defense. Because the first time I heard this, I was listening to Scott Reisch, and he was like, oh, another discovery violation, sloppy, sloppy. But when you listen to exactly what happened, it's the dog handler guy who was sloppy. He met with the sheriff, he met with police later to go over what happened, to go over first testimony, and then somebody said, well, didn't you write a report? And he's like, oh yeah, I did. Did you tell anybody? No. Okay, well, it's like you can't prove a negative. So, this is one of those things where the law has rules, you follow the rules, and it's just tough nuts to how that falls. So, in fairness to anybody on trial, and maybe we would be on trial and accused, and maybe we felt, we would say, we're innocent. So you can't just bring in evidence at the last minute. So that is kind of the problem that we have. They were trying to bring in evidence even though the prosecution didn't know it. So what are you going to do? Nobody gets it. So I don't think that is that important. I mean, it's a nice extra thing to have because it's a circumstantial case. Again, I was listening to Scott Reisch on Crime Talk. He gives a daily rundown of things that he feels important about. He is a defense attorney, and you very much get the defense attorney perspective, but it is great because he's a lawyer, and he like Emily D. Baker, will talk about law talking words and rules that help us understand why things happen. Now, he said, oh, these two people didn't show up. And it sounded to me like he was saying the prosecution witnesses were like afraid to show up or didn't want, like, disparaging. That's the way I took it. Sorry, Scott. Maybe you didn't mean it that way. Maybe I misunderstood. Could be my bad. It's all my speculation and opinion. But one was a forensic nurse, and she was the one who looked at the photographs of the scratches on Barry's arms. So what you need to know about this is a forensic nurse is an extra certification for nurses who go through training to help police out, to help investigators out, to they're usually either there or they look at photographic evidence to ascertain how that probably happened. They're trained in fact, the certification of this woman is called SANE, which is a sexual assault nurse examiner. So she's trained in those type of assaults. So what was said, or what I heard was said was, well, so how could she be an expert? I mean, she's just looking at a photograph. So I did a little research, and there's a lot of research about photography as evidence. And people do look at photographs. In fact, some photographs, I guess photography can show you other things, not just, I mean, you can look at it different ways. You have to be taught. So, and this is a specialty. So I felt like he was disparaging nurses. Like, oh, how's that an expert? She's a nurse. So the forensic part is what's special. And if you know anything about nursing these days, there's like nurse anesthetists, there's nurse practitioners that are almost like at the doctor level, not exactly, but nurses do, they do more than you think. And then when they get all these extra special certifications, they are sort of experts. So, and she didn't just not show up. Apparently, so this is a motions hearing, this in limine hearing, and it was brought because the defense, rightfully so, wanted to discuss what can come in and out, but they don't know about that scheduling, and she was at a conference. So I don't think that's a big deal she didn't show up. And there was another expert that had a similar, there was a conflict of interest. So that person, again, it will be talked about at some other time. The nurse is going to come back April 29th, which is right before the trial starts. So that is kind of interesting. And the other big news for all of this is about the vet. The vet will be a witness. They just can't say expert witness. So that's when you see these terms, 12 out of the 14 expert witnesses got I don't know if they said thrown out, but that's how I took it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot. That sounds horrible. What is the prosecution doing? And there's all these people online going, the prosecution really screwed this up. Well, this problem is when they talked about the tranquilizer and the effects on a human, the defense said, well, you can't be an expert on that. There's not research on that. So how can you be an expert? Well, here's the thing. And I believe this vet was the one who patented the actual tranquilizer that they think was used. So I would think that would, if that's accurate, but it might not be. But regardless, I did a little extra research and looked online for scholarly articles of animal tranquilizer use in humans. And I found the only research, and it was like a case study, which means it was on one person. It wasn't experimental research. There was no even quasi-experimental design. It was a veterinarian at a zoo who had overdosed herself on an animal tranquilizer. Used it like as a drug, like a recreational drug. It appeared from the article. So there were effects written about that drug on a human. But here's the thing. There won't be research on how does this animal tranquilizer affect humans, because that would be unethical. There's no Dr. Mengele doing research on, well, let's hope, on people using animal tranquilizers on humans. You can't do that study. It would never get past the Human Research Board approval process for anybody, because there is no reason to shoot up humans with any sort of animal tranquilizer. So there are no experts because it's unethical. So it's kind of a catch-22 situation, but that vet will be allowed to, she will be allowed to testify. They just won't call her an expert. So I think that's kind of a lot of those, like 12 out of 14. Like, people can testify, but calling somebody an expert witness gives them more authority and is more important. So, and that does, it affects the building blocks of the argument that the prosecution is making, because it's a circumstantial case. Speaking of which, Iris stood up, Iris Eaton, my favorite attorney in this case. Iris, let me talk to you directly. You can't get up and say, this is a missing persons case. She said, I specifically want to make this distinction. It is a missing persons case, not a no-body homicide. All right. Iris, do you not remember that your client, Barry Morphew, I believe it was 6 months after his wife was missing, had her declared dead? Barry said, she's dead. Barry said it. So, Iris, honey, please, how can you say she's missing when it comes down to, is my client guilty of murdering her, because she's not even dead? On the other hand, your client got over, I believe, $1 million money out of property owned by Suzanne because he declared her dead. I don't know, but that doesn't seem, truthful. So which is it? Is she missing and Barry defrauded insurance companies and realty companies out of $1 million worth of property? Or is she dead? And then if she's dead, who did it? See how, again, it's kind of like the DNA thing that I believe you dropped. Iris, you've got to make sure your arguments fit all the other actions of Mr. Morphew. Okay. And Iris, I just pick on you because you're a clever girl. Lady, sorry. Lawyer. Doesn't matter what your gender is, right? And I don't even know how you identify. But I think Iris is very bright. And so that's why I pick on her a little bit, because she makes very good arguments. It's just, unfortunately, her client has done things, and I'm sure she's like, oh, why did you not shut up? Because as Scott Reisch says, lawyer, that's how you get out of things. All right, so we will have more argumentation about, there'll be more about motions. We'll hear more about that because we're getting ready to go to trial, and jury selection is supposed to be starting. So we will hear more and more about, every week we're going to talk about Barry Morphew because it's happening. All right. We have just some small updates happening in other cases. The other big crazy case we have going on a little bit is the Daybell Fallow. There's an update. So in the last episode, we discussed that that the judge said, no, you can't separate the cases. They're still joined, which is kind of bad because if they're not joined, the other one can just blame the person who's not there. What we still don't know and what we're waiting for is she or isn't she? Is Lori competent yet or is she not? And we still don't know. But today there was the prosecution filed, sorry, sucks to be blind. The prosecution filed an updated supplement of disclosure document to address the motions about transferring the jurors. So the jurors will be coming from Ada County. The prosecution is saying, could we bust them? Now, let me just say one thing. Now, this is Idaho, and I think it's a 2-hour or 3-hour. It's a long bus ride, but there's movies that are 2 hours. And I'm thinking if you don't want to sequester a jury in a hotel because of all the publicity, how better to maintain that sort of buffer with what's going on than to, give them some great coffee and muffins on one of those tour buses in the morning. They see some pre-taped whatever, I don't know what you want to watch in the morning. And then at night, they get a movie, or maybe movie both ways. That way, they are maintaining some sort of buffer with the outside world and media, but they're fed and entertained, and it gives them sort of a decompression. So it's just like your commute to work, right? I don't know if that's what they're promoting instead of having everybody from the prosecution and all these people move to Boise, because that's where Ada County is, Boise, which is a great idea because it's a big, huge town and not as many people know what's going on. There's not as many people interested in the religious aspects of everything. So Boise is a better pool for jurors, but it's also, because it's the biggest city, I believe, in Idaho, it's expensive. So it's less expensive, and I think it provides that sort of buffer. I don't know. I think that's the best of both worlds. I don't know. That's just me. Just trying to make it work because I'm a taxpayer who wants my tax money going for what it should go for. And I really don't want people being, extra hotels and extra expenses if we can just bus the jury back and forth each day and really keep them very, happy on the way back and forth. And if they're not going to transport them back and forth and they're just going to bring the Ida jurors to stay in the area, it's much cheaper to stay around where Rexburg is than it is to stay in Boise. But I don't know. That's what they're still arguing about. And let's just face it. What we're really interested in is Lori competent? When will we know? Hopefully soon. I'm still hoping, because we didn't just hear look, it's going to be another 180 days. I'm hoping we're good to go. But that's really just me hoping. All right. The last two, there's just a last little update here. Unfortunately, the Petito Schmidt family was going civilly after the Laundries for basically incurring emotional damage. What do they call it? I don't think it's called indecent emotional distress, to cause emotional distress. So the problem with emotional distress law is the person who caused it needed to have some responsibility, not to cause it. And although we know that people really should be nicer to one another, and you would expect ethically and morally that the Laundries should have at least had the decency to say, look, this is where your daughter was left. Brian, or at least say Brian left her. The last time Brian saw her was in the park. I mean, that could have at least given a clue. Emily D. Baker on her channel covered the response that the laundry's attorneys. Now, this isn't Stephen Bertolino that was the spokesperson and the lawyer all through when they were searching for Gabby and Brian. This is a different law firm in Florida. And as Emily D. Baker says, the lawsuit was well written, the response, and had a lot of points. They are asking for a summary judgment and to dismiss the case with prejudice. So with prejudice means you can't come back. You can't amend it. I can see from what Emily explained, and it is true, the laundries had no legal responsibility. So the only way maybe forward is, it's interesting because the attorneys for the laundries mentioned that there was some law about the care of a deceased body and not taking good care of that. And Emily said, I don't even know what that kind of law is or where that came from. And if you're from Ohio, or I forget the other states this happened to, but it did happen in Florida, there have been cases where mortuaries have not, they've like said, yes, we've buried your loved one, and they don't. And they just keep bodies in like either freezers or they keep them outside. I mean, there's been a number of cases in that. So I think that's where that law came from, that you have, that was the responsibility to take care of a dead body, which I don't think, again, this isn't that situation, because although they knew where her body was, and the Petito Schmidt family, and I think rightfully so, says, and you know she was deceased, they personally had no responsibility because they weren't in care of her, even though she was in their house, but not in that way. So maybe it could be rewritten. I don't know. It seems like it might get dismissed. But you never know in Florida, right? Anything could happen. We all would like to know. I don't know. It won't bring her back. But it was horrible. They deserve more information. In my opinion, that is just my opinion. I mean, but the law seems to be clear. So, what I think is perhaps the Petito Schmidt family should work with, and I would help if we, like, I think the whole community would help to change laws. Because in Florida, there's also this thing about the family can't be charged with being an accessory if they help their child who has committed a crime, I believe, when we were talking about this when it first all happened last August. So it seems like that's kind of like having immunity. And if you remember in the GMAX case, we were talking about Juror 50 could have gotten in trouble, but the judge gave them immunity, so then they could no longer plead the fifth. So, I don't know. It seems interesting. I think we should make a law that if you know something about a person who is deceased and or hurt mortally, and you know your kid, like in Florida, so your kid has told you about it, you should have to tell. That should be a responsibility that we all have, that if you know of a dead body, you should have to tell. I think so. So, and that would criminalize it more than making it a civil thing. I'm sure somebody could write it civilly as well. But so, since there is no responsibility on people who know of somebody who's deceased and where they are, is what I understood it to be. So you can't say you're causing me pain and suffering because you have a responsibility to tell me where my deceased loved one is. Then we should make that a law. I mean, that's the thing about America. It isn't just lawmakers who can make law. The people can get together and write initiatives and write bills and get them into a voting so that the public can vote on it. I mean, it's not an easy process, but I would be willing to help out with that in my state of Ohio. And I don't know if there's federal civil laws. Emily D. Baker or Scott Reich or Lori Hellis could tell us. Lori Hellis could tell us. That sounds like a show. Anyways, so this we'll see what happens, what the judge says. But so if there's a summary judgment and it's with prejudice, that means the Petito Schmidt family can't talk back. They can't appeal. They can't do anything more. If the judge says that they deny the case right now, but with the right to amend, then they could come back and amend it. Again, though, I think Emily D. Baker's right. There is no responsibility, and that is a shame. All right, so Judge Nathan, speaking of GMAX, said, I've read everything, and I talked to Juror 50, and I really feel like they made a fair and impartial decision based on the evidence, not based on their past. And I think they made an honest mistake, and so Ghislaine will be sentenced on June 28th as it stands right now. Of course, we expect an appeal, right? I mean, she's got a really great defense attorney, and that's that. So, we had 2 horrible bad news this week with the finding of Naomi, Ariane, and the finding of Cassie Carly. Although there was one bright thing, was that Cassie Carly's daughter was found unharmed, Sailor, and I believe she's back with her family in Florida. Although, at the time of this taping, the very last thing I saw, and thank you to the docket on Twitter, it's Big E on YouTube. Thank you so much. He uploaded right away that today, I believe it was today, Marcus, Cassie Carly's ex-boyfriend, and who is alleged to have murdered her. He was in court today in Tennessee, and he is fighting extradition as we expected. The judge says he will see him on April 13th, because I guess with Florida wanting him to extradite him, there's like a 10-day some sort of window, and we're going to go back and forth, I guess, and it takes up to 30 days. But he said something strange. He said he wanted to waive extradition because he wanted to make sure his daughter was with people that it sounded like that he picked, and I don't know what that's about, and I don't know how many relatives he has, but good Lord, let's just hope they're with and stay with Cassie's family, because just my opinion, dude has issues. All right, I think that's it. I got a little disheveled here. I will get better about those in limine hearings for Morphew. We'll talk more about that. We're gonna see some of this other stuff. The only thing I didn't mention, and I think I was just gonna say a little bit about the South CAC, like Grapevine, chitter chatter down there. Okay, so come here. Let me tell you something. Again, it was from Scott Reisch. Scott, I watch you every day. And you said something about there was this police chief, Alexander, and I was like, sounds like Boss Hogg. Taking a $5,000. It sounded, no offense, when Scott said it sounded horrible. I was like, oh my gosh, just there's so much corruption. And the thing is, in South CAC, one hand does wash the other, and corruption is a funny thing. It's kind of, it's really it's like baked into their process almost. And I think it would be hard pressed for you to find anybody that the Murtaughs didn't give. Now, this is all alleged, and this is all my opinion. But, they made, they were the straw that stirs the drink in Hampton County. And so, I think it was called something like Yazima. The man is an African-American police chief. Maybe it was a loan for his parents. I don't know. But he wanted to become the Hampton County sheriff. And he's running as a Democrat. And I spoke to somebody who knows all about the Low Country and who lives down there. And let me just tell you, you would need to grease some palms to be a Democrat and get anywhere. And I don't know. I'm pretty sure that many people were, that the Murtaughs, or the Murdoch, as they say down in South CAC, I'm just imagining you would find it hard to find somebody they didn't try to grease palms with so that everybody was on the same page, as it were, when it came to certain things. And then there was another brouhaha about the solicitor from the area that was supposed to be there at the Moselle property. I believe it was the 14th district, and his nickname, I think he's Isaac Stone, but he goes by Duffy Stone. And he said there's a conflict of interest as of August, and this happened, in, I believe it was late June. They're like, oh, he was at the property. Ooh, we saw him, and we think there's something sketch, and he's trying to have a separate investigation than SLED. And SLED came out and said, no, what are you talking about? Now, where did we get this rumor from? Well, the other day, and I'm sure it was a total misunderstanding, but Alec brother, not the lawyer brother, but a brother who's in construction, or something with constructive equipment. John Martin? I don't know. Everybody has two names in the South. It's very hard to keep up track. But John Martin Murtaugh, something. Anyway, Johnny gave an interview, and somehow from the interview it was like, ooh, sounds like maybe Duffy's doing something. And I don't know, but consider the source. Again, all scuttlebutt. What we know is SLED, which is South Carolina's state investigatory group, they said, no, he did have like he said, I know the family. Again, here's what's interesting down there. They should just bring in people from like Ohio or even, I don't know, Oklahoma or Iowa, because everybody in South Cac knows everybody else. I swear to God, they all went to the University of South Carolina. It's hard to see what is the true conspiracy, which I think there is something going on. But it's hard to see what's really going on when it's so incestual anyways, with everybody growing up with everybody going to the same good schools, good law schools, everybody going to the same parties, everybody intermarrying, everybody giving everybody money just because, like Alec volunteered someplace. How long did he everybody does everything with everybody because, one, it's the South and you're neighborly, and two, South Cac politics, it's very hard to unentwine yourself from everybody else. I don't know. So, the Murdaugh case is gonna still be super interesting. And in all of this, what happened to Maggie's money? Maggie Murtaugh's money is gone. Where'd that go? That is strange. Follow the money, and I'm still concerned with the murders. I still am not buying that Alec did it. But I think Alec is the reason. I don't think he did it, though. That's just me. If you have any comments, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, smash that like button, all the good YouTubey stuff. I will see you next week. This was kind of a little bit off the rails, and I don't know. It was a bad week. Too many people dead. Too many sad stories. Can't we all just get along? Sorry. It's really been a crazy week. But hopefully you've enjoyed this episode of the True Crime Grapevine. You can come back here and sit down next to me next week. I upload every Tuesday, and I will tell you what everybody's been talking about. I can't promise it's the truth, but it is my impression of what everybody's saying, allegedly. Just my speculation. And I will see you next Tuesday. Until then, be safe, take a buddy wherever you go and or witness. All right? Lock your doors. Bye.